I think we're going to just start without Yvonne. She'll come into the room in a second. So let me see if I can be a little bit more clever here and share a screen. And I just want to start off with, let's see, PowerPoint slide. I think that's the one I want to share. It should just be a blank screen, which it seems to be. And I wanted just to talk a moment about time. We have this concept of time. Let me see if I can get a little thing here which to draw with. There we go. Looks like I can draw on the screen now. Get this thing out of the way. We have this concept of time in the Western world where we have this thing called now. Then anything this side of now, if you can't see it, just please interrupt. Just turn on your audio and say, I can't see anything, but I think you can see it. This side of now we call future. It's very awkward writing on the screen with my pen here because it's a bit wobbly, but nevertheless. And this side of now, we call this the past. And this comes about because we have this thing, the numbering line that the Greeks sort of invented, and in this direction it sort of goes off into infinity, and in this direction it goes off into infinity. And this represents the way, this is based on the same way that we represent numbers. We have this thing called 0 in the middle, and +1, +2, and so it goes off in this direction, and -1, -2, and it goes off in that direction into infinity as well. So, oh yeah, I forgot to record, so let me just get the recording going at this stage. Where do we do that?
It says it's recording, Thomas.
Is it recording? Okay, thanks, mate.
Well, it's flashing, yeah. I don't know from your side, but it's on my screen. It says recording.
It seems like it is. I think it's somehow just kicks off and records all by itself. But anyway, this is cool. Thanks, man. So our idea of time and our idea of numbers are very much interlinked, and these are Western concepts that we've sort of got pretty much embedded in our head, and we can do maths on time in the same way that we can do maths on numbers as well. So let me bring myself back here while we talk about this. So with that idea of the numbering, that idea of numbers and time being the same sort of thing, we've always sort of orientated ourselves to that kind of logic and thinking around time. We have this thing in the future, and we can say +2 years or plus so many hours, and we divide it off just like we do with numbers, and it's very fractional. The fractions of a year would be months, and the fractions of a month would be days, and the fractions of that would be hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds, and so we can go down to picoseconds. We can divide it all out. And there is, just as there is in numbers, we have this idea of the number line. And if I draw a little mark on that number line and I say this represents 3, here's Yvonne back in the room. Did you manage to connect your mom?
No, I think you still have control of her machine and she can only see herself.
Oh dear.
Doesn't matter. We'll do a test for next time.
We'll do a test.
We'll send her a recording.
Yeah, okay, never mind. So if I draw a little number on that numbering line and say this represents 2, that little stroke that I make, if I take a magnifying glass and zoom in on that little stroke, I'll see that it's maybe as thick as the pencil that I've got here. And then I could subdivide that, and I could go in with an electron microscope and expand that line. And I can always subdivide. So I can go 2.0, 2.0001, and so I can go, and that's infinite. I can keep dividing that little mark more infinitely. All I do is I push the zeros out behind the decimal point, or I push them out in front of the decimal point as I go down. And so we never really find what that dividing line is. It's not a finite dividing line, it's an infinite dividing line. And it's a meeting point between what lies in front of that dividing line and what lies behind that dividing line. And that creates concepts when we impose the same rules as rules of mathematics. When we impose those same rules of mathematics on something like time, then we have the future, the stuff that lies in front of that line, and we have the past, the stuff that lies behind the line. And now, this idea of now is non-existent, because you can always go closer and closer and closer. In what millisecond, in what picosecond is now? And when we superimpose the idea of time on top of the numbering line, then we run into troubles, because now does not exist. It is a meeting point. It is a virtual meeting point between past and future. And then now is just a non-existent thing. So when we try to wrap our mind around time in the same way, let me get back to the slide that I was sharing here. This idea here, and the drawing goes away, but it doesn't matter. We've got the idea of the drawing line. And when we try to get to that point, which we now call now, and we try to see what is now, we see that it is just merely an intersection, or it is a meeting point between future and a meeting point between past. Sorry, in my drawing I've overlapped them, but they don't really overlap. They sort of come together a little bit like this, even though I overlap them. But they're a virtual meeting point for this thing called now. And I suppose it's easy to see that since this side has infinity, and it's infinitely long, and that side is infinitely long, that we could easily join these things up in this virtual bubble of this lazy 8, this infinity symbol, and we say there are past happenings and there are future happenings, and there is this magical spot somewhere in the middle which represents now. And if you collapse the past and the future, which was, I think, what Yvonne was trying to write about, then it all sort of, I think Kavendran and Yvonne were sort of pursuing that point, then it collapses down onto an intersection somewhere in the middle there that is non-existent. It's non-existent, it's infinitely small, it's a point of, maybe the word here is singularity. And the word singularity comes from cosmology, not astrology so much, but from cosmology. And cosmology is that meeting point. Let me just get rid of that and come back out of sharing for a bit. Cosmology is that start, that infinitely small start of the universe as we know it. And it says somewhere before the Big Bang took place, there was this infinitely small, non-existent place of nothingness. No thing had yet come into existence. It was just a place of pure potential. And in its place of pure potential, when the Big Bang happened, then everything went into the world of duality. So when you get that lazy 8, it represents the world of duality, because if you've got now, which is the point of singularity, and you bring it into the world of duality, all we can conceive of in our head is these two lobes, and these two lobes represent this entity that we call past and the entity that we call future. Just like we would be in the world of duality with up and down, or left and right, or front and back, or inside or outside, or everything that we can conceive in the world of duality has its opposite. And in that world of duality, the time would have its opposite. We'd have past and present, past, present, and future. Present being this non-existent meeting point, this intersection, the junction between the two things called past and future. But we were doing a what do you call one of those things, a Gita retreat once. And let me just share my screen again. So we're going to be in and out of this little sharing just for a bit, and it's fine to do that. Let me go one slide forward just to get a black slide here. We were doing a Gita retreat, and when we were doing the Gita retreat, we were trying to get the concept of what time is all about. And it was George, a friend of ours, who said, well, if there's this moment called now, surely we can say that everything else, all of this other space around it, can be labeled as not now. And I love that concept. I played with that concept for a very long time, because there's now and not now, unless the idea of past and future is just an idea that we hold in our head, whereas the idea of past and future, now and not now, is a much easier thing to grasp. Gone all blurry, I just need to move about. There we go. It's a much easier concept to grasp than in terms of our spirituality and this idea of spiritual time, if you like, rather than linear time. And then there is this thing called now, and now is around always, and it doesn't move. And there's whatever else that other thing is called not now. Well, that's something else. We don't quite know what that is. So imagine that my cell phone is just a notepad for a moment, and imagine that I could, with this stylus, I have to do things backwards and forwards here. Imagine that I could just write on this thing, and there was a piece of paper. And if I had a pen here that had green ink in it, and I started to write around on this piece of paper, and went round and round and round and round, I'd have these the squiggly line going everywhere. The nib of the pen would only be in one point on that line at any given time, no matter how I wiggled it across this piece of paper. And this idea of time in terms of the way the world sees time is that idea. My speaker's not working. No, don't worry, Yvonne, that's something else. Okay. So lost my train of thought now.
Sorry, I think it shows that we're not.
Sorry. Anyway, so that point, that nib, can only be in any one place on that line at any time, but it'd make a very wiggly green line on my notepad. However, if I took a red pen and just held it very gently and never moved it anywhere, and took my notepad and wiggled it around the pen without moving the pen anywhere, I'd make a red line that would look, when I looked at it, very much the same as the green line that I'd made. And so for me, that metaphor works quite well, because let's say that I'm busy in time. Let's say I'm like everyone else in the world, stuck in this linear concept of time, and I'm busy, and time is finite, and life is going to end at the end of the, when I die, and time is money, and I'm busy pursuing it. Then I'm like the green pen. There is a moment of now, but it's just tracking out this very complex pattern of life. The other way is to be Buddha-like, and to come and be still, and to find that center of gravity, and to find that moment of now, which never moves anywhere. It's always present. But then I allow life just to jostle around that. And life just comes and buffets against that marker, and it'll trace out in the Akashic field a pattern similar to the other pattern. The difference being that in the metaphor of the green ink line, I would be busy pursuing it and driving it and trying to direct it, and getting all angry, full of anguish about where I go with it. Whereas if I was the red pen and I was just still, and I allowed life just to jostle by with its ups and downs and all its stuff, then what would happen with that is it would track out in the Akashic field exactly a similar kind of pattern. But I would be still, and I'd be at rest and at peace, and I would be having this human experience, but grounded in the now. And I think that creates quite a unique challenge for us. When you go and read Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, I think that's what he's alluding to. How can you be grounded in that thing? So for people who go on the spiritual quest and mindfulness and all of these techniques, and they try to pursue now, what they try to do is they try to fall in that crack, in that dividing line, somewhere between past and future. And that is just non-existent. And in that whole concept of that numbering line of time, it becomes an impossible challenge to live in the now. What is this thing called now? I'm always pursuing future activities, and I'm always in remorse and regret of the line that I've left traced behind the nib. But if I'm one of those kind of people that can just be in the now, and I can be like the red pen, and I'm just still, and I allow life just to move around me, then I will have my experiences, and some of those experiences are going to be emotional and joyful. But emotional, joyful, well, joy is an emotion, but it would be emotional in terms of joy, or it would be emotional in terms of sadness, and I would feel waves of embarrassment and guilt and shame, but I'd still be grounded in that moment of now. And if that is true, then I want to pop up the slide that I really wanted to talk about now. Let me see if I can just find it here. You can just go and share it and go one step forward. It's just going to work for me. Or is it one? There it is. Oops. Back. There's the slide that I wanted to show you. And it's quite complex. You might have to just drag me out of the way and put me sort of somewhere in the middle of the screen under the word mindfulness there. Otherwise, it's going to block some of the little drawings in the corners. Let's start with this drawing down here in the bottom left-hand corner. This drawing in the bottom of the left-hand corner kind of is Freud's iceberg metaphor of the conscious and subconscious mind. Conscious mind sticking above the waterline, subconscious just below the waterline, and unconscious, the very deep part, the part of the iceberg dragging on the floor. I don't want to talk too much about that, but what really happens here is that it's interesting to know that the brain itself has never seen the light of day. The brain does not know what the outside world looks like. It's encased in bone. The only way that it has any idea of what the outside world is like is through the five senses. And those five senses are represented by those words, the letters at the bottom there, V-A-K-O-G. V for visual, A for auditory, K for kinesthetic, O for olfactory, that's smell, and G for gustatory, the sense of taste. Without those five senses, the mind would be left only in the subconscious and I suppose conscious space, but everything that it would perceive would be imaginary. And we have that capacity, and that's a very interesting capacity to have. We have, if we shut out all the five senses, which we can do with hypnosis or other trance-inducing techniques, we can still down the five senses, and What is left? Do we disappear? No, don't. We're left in that world of imagination. And that world of imagination can be very, very, very real. My mom, she's coming on 92. Every day when I phone her, she lives in a world of illusion. She's lost her sense of sight. She's in a wheelchair. She's just parked in the lounge, in the frail care where she's looked after. And there she's left up to her imagination, and she's lost the ability to differentiate between what is imagined and what is real. Interesting that this almost is that figure eight upside down, or turned through 90 degrees. There is the world of consciousness at the top end, and there's the world of deep unconsciousness at the other end. They're the two extremes in the world of opposites. Where in this model of this lazy eight is that point where we find our awareness, but we're not engaging conscious thinking, and we're not engaging thoughts of any kind. Well, that might be somewhere down here in the subconscious mind. And if we teach something like hypnosis or whatever, we kind of say that trance brings us to this magical spot somewhere in the subconscious. Here's an interesting example too. If you go to this side of the thing, bottom right, this is Maslow's pyramid of hierarchical needs. We can only ever get to a place of safety when we're taking care of our physiological needs. We can never only get to have social acceptance if both the bottom two are met. We only get to feel self-esteem if we've met all three bottom ones. And we can only come to a realization of self if all of these are met. We need to be physiologically taken care of. We need to have a roof over our head. We need to have social interaction, a good sense of self-esteem. Only then is the mind capable of holding on to anything that is about self. This, notice, stops here. Maslow did not take this pyramid and project it up into an ethereal space. He kept it in the place of psychology. However, if we come to the top left-hand drawing here, we'll find that this is the chakra system, and here is a bottom pyramid, and here is a top pyramid, and these two meet around the middle point, the heart center. Everything above the heart center is about mindfulness. It's all out of the world out of the material world. Everything in the pyramid below that line is everything in the material world. It's very interesting to see that difference. What Maslow didn't do is link this drawing with this drawing, because this drawing here says that once all of the sensory input comes through our nervous system up into the mind, through the spinal cord, there comes one point here, can't draw it so very well on a wobbly screen, but one point here which we call primary encoding. This is when we register those senses. We have no idea that light is hitting the back of the retina. We have no idea that those signals are propagating their way through the optic nerve to the back of the brain. It is only when it lands on that primary encoding center do we realize that light has fallen into the retina of the eye. We're unaware of it. If we take a little pin and poke away at our big toe, we do not know that the toe is being poked at by the pin until that nerve signal propagates its way up into the brain to some place somewhere in the brain where it registers. Only then do we realize something is happening to the toe. As that signal propagates through the nerves of our bodies and up through the spine, we have no idea that anything is happening until it hits somewhere in the brain. Once it hits that primary encoding center, all I could ever tell you about the light is that it is bright, that it has color, but even the interpretation of color or light is an abstraction that I put on that. And we go through layer upon layer upon layer of abstraction, talking about the thing that we've sensed, rather than being in contact with the thing itself. So if it's light, then is it dim light or bright light? Is it what's the color of that light? What's the hue of that light? There's a lot of stuff that is happening just at a sensory level. But we will say the brightness of this light is too sharp. I don't like this light. And it's hard to see here because it's very small, but on the side here, I took an example of a lemon and said, this lemon, when it hits the taste buds, I will get a sensation. I'll only, once that lemon juice hits the taste buds, will I get a sensation. That's the primary encoding. But then I can start saying, this is sour, I don't like it. Lemon juice is like battery acid, don't give it to me. And so we go through a layer of interpretation of it. So this all brings us to this sort of drawing here. Oops, that was not meant to happen, ignore that. I was trying to move something else out of the way. It brings us to this drawing here in the middle. And this drawing in the middle here is the external material world. It controls and influences us. We have an interaction through our being, through our encoding, through socialization, through Maslow's pyramid of hierarchical needs, through the chakra system, through this, the way that the nervous system works and the way we encode things. We bring this up into a point where here is the meeting point of these two lobes. This is singularity. This is our place of primary encoding. This is our highest self. This is our place of personal Godhead, where we are just pure potential. This is where we are a being of limitless possibility. Here we are just as the observer. This is the place where we meet God, but not God with a big G, God with a little g. Now, I see that Zoom is giving us a little warning here, saying we've got 10 minutes and that we're running out of time. So let me see if I can wind this up in 10 minutes. Then we can let it hang, and I'll come back, open it up again, and we can take questions outside of the 10 minutes. So having reached this place of God, this is the little God. This is me as my Godhead. This is the place where I have collapsed all of the opposites. All of the world of duality lives here in this bottom of this pyramid. It is the pyramid that rests on the world. It has its base on the soil, if you like, around it. We have an interaction in the world. It is my body. It is my being. It is my concept of duality and time. More is never enough in the world of greed. More power, loss and fear, all of those things happen there. Once I get to this point here on this line, this crossover point, I reach that point of personal Godhead. This is the highest I can be in terms of my own sense of awareness. If I go beyond that, I have to step out of the world of sensory stuff. And when I step out of the world of sensory stuff, I go into this ethereal realm. Here is the real God. Here is just pure imagination. Here are just my ideas that are left in my head. If I can collapse my perceptual schemas, if I can let go my imagination, if I can stop all of that noise in my brain, all I'm left with here is the spiritual world. And this is the world of the Akasha. This is the world where we make connection with others at in levels like clairvoyance and energy and all of those kind of things. Let me just stop that share, come back just onto the screen just for a moment. There we go. And I'm going to wind this down right now, give you just 2 minutes to think about things. Maybe Zoom allows us to continue, but if you have any kind of questions, stick your hand up, unmute your mic when I call your name, and we'll see how long this lasts until such a time as Zoom kills us. Then I'll just go back into that meeting space, and you can just reconnect, and it might be kind enough to give us another half an hour or so. Questions? May. Go for it.
Always me. I want to ask, I don't know if I missed something, but does this model that you're using with the senses and so on, say for instance the brain, the receiver is malfunctioning and receiving, or in some way in the input and the processing or the output with the senses, there's a physiological issue. Would that mean that someone would not be able to, as you say, meet God, like be there in the middle, or not necessarily?
Don't mute your mic, stay so we can chat. But my feeling is that having this instrument is already an error. If we didn't have this instrument called a brain, we would probably just be in the presence of the divine all the time. This brain is part of the flesh of this being. And we get lost in the way that this brain is able to interpret the world. Think of those 5 senses, May. Each one of them is completely limited. I cannot see like an eagle. I cannot hear like a dog can hear. I cannot see light outside of the visible light spectrum. I can't see X-ray. I can't see infrared or any of those kind of things. What the brain gets and what it interprets in the stack of perceptual ideas is completely erroneous. And I think if it has a malfunction, sometimes what we call madness is maybe even more the truth. So when my mum now, when I talk to her and she sees my dad, who died 20 years ago, with another woman and a child, and she's absolutely convinced that she sees him, Yvonne and I are saying to each other, is she mad? Is she going through senile dementia? Or is she perhaps starting to see him in another context? Maybe she's seeing him in another reincarnated form. We can't say. So I'm not sure that this thing is our very best instrument. It's the best computer we know in this universe in terms of computers as machines. but I think it's still deeply, deeply flawed. And if we did come and go in different iterations, in different incarnations, I think maybe there are other beings somewhere else in this universe who have a better instrument, who can tune into the reality of this world in a much broader sense that would completely overwhelm us, mate. If there's nothing more to add, you can mute your mic. Anyone else want to ask?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Yeah. So I must say that that drawing that I put up there just now, it's a complex drawing. That drawing has been through many, many, many iterations of my meditation and thinking and ideas about how things all hang together. Because when I was a kid, it was all about God and science, and the two were like they never, there was no meeting place between those two things. Not in the religion that I grew up in, anyway. To a point where, you know, scripture like wisdom of the world, science and technology and all of those things, is foolishness with God, is disdain in God's eyes. But I can't reconcile that. When I lectured for 20 years in the planetarium, it was very refreshing for me to see how this all hangs together, and somehow those things must find a meeting point. They must come together, and there must be a dovetail. And I can't dismiss science, but I think that science is only half of the picture. And there must be some place somewhere in our being where we can come to that point of singularity, that meeting point in that lazy eight, that place of non-attachment where we can let go thoughts and imagination and ideas and perceptions and let it all go. And in that moment, just poof, there we are as the personal Godhead, not the great divine Godhead. That's probably our meeting of soul. And soul is probably that personal Godhead. It is the part of us that was made in the likeness and image of the greater Godhead, the God with a capital G. But in that moment, that's where we are. And it's pure and it's holy and it was never born, it will never die. It has every attribute that the capital Godhead has, that lowercase Godhead has as well. It's sinless. It does not know about error. It is just an observer. It doesn't direct anything. It just like God with a capital G doesn't really direct anything, but yet is the powerhouse that allows everything to exist. That Godhead with a little g is also that meeting point where it's the observer, if you want to call God with a little g soul and science's observer. I think they're the same thing. I think those things come together and they're just synonyms for the same thing. And so if it is just the observer, all it does is it observes. It's not a director. It simply enables. It is the point of pure potential that will allow everything to flow. So we need an agent. It's like the paint pan and the paint on the artist's palette. It's just there. All the colors are on the artist's palette. You need a brush and an artist to take those bits of the paint and to mix them together and to create the colors and the hues and to put them up on the canvas and to create a painting. And what would that creative agent be? If God is just the color, the little God with a lowercase, it's just a pure possibility, the potential of who we can be. It's not the artwork. It's just the possibility of an artwork. I see we've got less than a minute. But then what happens is that the mind is the artist, and the mind will go and it will create a picture. And the picture can be a beautiful, world-famous picture, or it can be sinister and dark and deathly. It's up to the artist, up to the mind to decide what kind of a painting it wants to put up there. Any other questions? Shall we reconnect or shall we just call it quits? We call it quits.
I still have more. I wanted to add there's no time, but I wanted to add the heart. The desire is what gives this whole thing.
Then we're going to hang up and we're going to come back. Deal.
Can we?
So while we're waiting, I think another symbolic thing for that point was the Christian cross. The Christian cross symbolizes in the center that specific point, and that was what the Gnostics were hiding away. The symbolization of the cross is that center point.
That's interesting, Ken. And then that would account for why that cross is a cross with a circle around that center point too.
Yes.
And in Christianity, that center point seems to have got lost somehow.
Yes.
May, you
That's
had a
interesting
question?
for with. Yeah, no, I just wanted to add something to what Ken is saying about the cross, also because it's not from religion or from any of those. It's just from the work that I do. I always use the cross as the heart, which, and then the horizontal represents for me time, and this is a point, space in time, and that creates that now, this because that's where I'm choosing. That's where if the Bible story, where the Christ, where I, where the higher and the lower self meets, when I give up the flesh and I hand over and surrender, and then the communication can flow, both ways, and it doesn't,
That's
and the
very
time
cool.
doesn't make sense. Yeah.
And also,
So
I don't want to steal Yvonne's thunder here, but because Yvonne wants to say something too. But when Yvonne came back from one of her Sundance experiences, a profound message had come back with her, and that was that the longest journey ever is to go from here to here, the heart. And it's not the brain. That cross does not cross here on the brain. The cross crosses here on the heart. And it's that heart center. It's sort of cross my heart. You'll see when the Christians do the crossing of the heart. It's on the heart center, and this is the spirituality. Yes, Ken.
On hermetics and alchemy, the cross is in the solar plexus.
In the solar plexus.
The akasha gets stored in the solar plexus, and the reason for that is that's the differentiated between the magnetic and the electrical portions of the human being. So the akasha gets stored in the solar plexus, not the navel. The solar plexus is just under the breastbone.
Yeah.
There's that small little breastbone there.
Yeah.
And that is the center point.
That's interesting.
Ken, would that also be just like in Tai Chi? Because also this is our center of strength, because that's where the two pyramids then would be meeting, isn't it?
For now, yes. All right, it's a long discussion, but let's just say it's possible. But that is the general way of looking at it. But there's a much deeper way to explain it. But yes.
Can you open this?
Yeah, Yvonne wants to just go back to that slide that I'd written all over. So let me just get a clean version of it up. That one. There you go.
Yeah. It just came to me whilst Tom was talking.
You need a little stylus there.
Coming? Yeah. Okay.
Just click there.
Yeah, I got it. Okay.
There where it says draw.
Draw. Yeah.
Okay. Done.
All right. I got a pen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So whilst Tom was talking, hang on, is somebody else coming in here?
I think that's just Ray coming in.
Ray.
Hello, Ray.
Hi, Ray. Okay, so whilst Tom was talking, and if we look at this that I was referring to on the Circle of Friends, it is also the same thing what they say about time and the wormhole, because isn't this exactly the same as that wormhole of past and present and future is the same, and therefore there is none. It's the same symbol, is it not?
Well, in fact, Yvonne, I like that, because this is no time. This is that place where George said there's no time, and this is kind of now. It's the only concept of time that we have. But if you come out of time, which is only now, my feeling is that there's no other time dimension other than now. And you go above that line, you go into a place where even time is a meaningless concept.
For me, now would be more like here, because this is the whole, the symbol of the wormhole is like that, and it crosses over here. So for me, it would be now here, not now, not now, now.
I think now the idea of past and future here are illusions.
Yes.
I think it's just an illusion because of the numbering line that we were so used to measuring things about. I have a feeling that there is a concept of time and there is no concept of time. And that goes back to George's drawing of now and not now. This is the not now. And this is the now.
May I say something here?
Yes, go for it, Ken.
Something else is, at that point, there's two things needed. Firstly, I've got to release time, and then I must release and expand space.
Yes.
So the top is all about space.
Correct.
Because at that point, at the singular point, I release time, and then to get to the same basis as the pyramid at the bottom, I've got to expand the space on the top.
Correct.
And the expansion of the space is what allows for Akasha to come into play.
Correct. And so, Ken, I also feel that we look at this, what looks like concrete here. Let me just get another color here. There we go. So this in blue, this whole pyramid, is made like what you see there. The illustration says kind of made of concrete. It's a concrete block. And we think it's mine because it's separate from your concrete block. But actually, it's just matter. And the atoms that I have are not my atoms, because within 7 years, most of my body, the atoms that I had in my body would have been shed anyway, and they would have been given away. And so I might call this mine down here. But I also, above the line, this blue up top here, I also want to tend to call mine in terms of spirituality. But it's not mine. The nothingness belongs to all of us, just like the somethingness also belongs to all of us. It's an illusion in our heads. We think we're separate from anything, really. And so by getting out of the material and going to the ethereal, we still have this notion of identity. Identity still happens, and I think that idea of identity is part of our failure, part of our fear. We are so afraid to let go of that identity as we transit through this thing of soul here in the middle. I think what we are is we're so worried about letting that identity go and being nothing. That's the big fear, especially in our Western upbringing, that we will become nothing. If we let go of the body, we've forgotten. We need to immortalize it in terms of statues and paintings and stuff like that. But and we also, as we transit into the spiritual space, we cling to this idea of soul, which also has personal identity, and we want to hang on to our experiences that we've written in the Akashic field. And what we ultimately need to do is we need to let go of all of that to be free. That's why there is the bottom part. This part here connects with Earth, but this part up here connects ultimately with God, capital God.
I have something that I've been grappling with over the last couple of sort of months or so. I'm going to take maybe a different, let me go here. If I take what she said to me and said the longest journey is from the head to the heart, how then does the chakra system, the oriental system, and this whole chakra idea, which resonates very much, but how does that then go this way if we need to feel it here? Because he says you need to get out of your head and feel it here. How then does this link to that?
I think I have an answer for that. I think what happens is that we all down here, this is the world. It's all about material, and it's all about sensory stuff, and it's about acquisition and sexual encounters and one thing and another. And the first spiritual journey we have is we find our way upwards and bypass the heart, and we come into the head. And everything about our spirituality is head-based. We have knowledge. We go and read the books, and we pick up on all the clever cliches and things. And then I think what we have to do is we have to cancel out the perceptual schemas. And then the next journey is for us to come back to that center point of who we are. Then we're coming down to this middle point somewhere here. And once we get there, we're still identified as soul, and we still have that last clinging of ego. And we have to demolish that. And when that last vestige of ego goes, we're into it. We've now then collapsed into the rest of the universe. Right?
I don't know. It's the connection is breaking up a little bit. I hope it's clear.
I can hear you.
It's okay. So just on the chakra system, it's interesting, Yvonne, that you said it's the longest journey is from here to the heart, because it's exactly the same that I've had in my. It's actually a few years ago. So collectively, we're not at that point so much anymore, but a few years ago, most of the people that I worked with that had to take a long journey, it was actually in the solar plexus where, according to what I work with, it's the will and it's the control. And so beneath the heart is the ego, basically the lower self, and then above the heart is the higher self. So where people would get stuck and what would be difficult to get through is releasing that control and coming up into the heart space of surrender, and not, and then coming out of the mind. So from my perspective, this mind, as much as the brain is there and so on, this energy center for me represents more perspective, like which, there's always choice involved. And for that, the solar plexus is, It's almost like it has to keep you safe, like the ego, until you've learned to choose differently. So your viewpoint would, you know, if I combine what you said and what I've experienced, it's the viewpoint that is so hard to shift into the heart because of the choice of the ego to still control, which is in the solar plexus. So the movement then is from above, from that spiritual inspiration, and from the ego side, from that survival base, and that's how the two triangles eventually connect and start integrating, so that we can combine the higher and the lower realms.
I love what you're saying, but notice what you're saying. There is the lower self down here, and there's the higher self up here, and there is this journey up and back down again. But notice the common denominator. Both of these, whether lower or higher, both still have the concept of self, and it's still stuck with this notion of identity. And I think once we come to settle here, solar plexus or heart or wherever this is, that sort of middle point in our being, this point over here, it's getting a bit messy now, but that center point in the being, I think we still left with that concept of self. And I think that's probably one of the scariest things to let go, is to say, who will I be? You know, if you talk to a whole bunch of New Age spiritually aware people, it sounds judgmental. I suppose it is. I own that. But let's say people who have gone from the material world and material value and seeing the essence of their beings only in terms of what they own, their acquisitions. And these are people who have let go of that to some degree, and they've come into their spiritual self, but it's still a head-based spiritual self. Finally, even in there, the idea is that, thank God I've got reincarnation, because I'll survive into the future. I'm guaranteed to survive into the future because of my reincarnate self. No, hang on a minute. Can you not even let that go and just amalgamate with the universe itself? I see we've lost Drake. But can I not just be part of universal energy, regardless of that last vestige of self, that egoistic idea? Nothing done.
Maybe there's two things we must. Sorry, can you hear me, Tom? Can you guys hear me? Tom, can you hear?
You got me?
Okay. You guys back, Tom? Yeah.
You muted, Tom.
You're muted, Tom. Tom, you guys are muted.
Okay, should be back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just something from my side. We've got to maybe look at two things. There's a physical aspect, and we might often confuse the physical with the etheric space. So we can call etheric astral as well. So the chakra system is the energy centers of the astral body, not of the physical body.
Yeah.
So maybe if we say the longest path is from the head to the heart, that might mean to access the astral field, because the heart is associated with the astral field or the etheric body, depending from where you are looking at it. So we need to access the astral field. Once we access the astral field, which is in relation to the heart center, to feeling, because astral is feeling, it's emotion, and it's physical feeling. Only then we can access the energy centers of the chakra system. So often what is happening in the New Age, we are taking the chakra system and imprinting it onto a physical body. It's got nothing to do with the physical body.
Yeah, got you.
Thanks, Magda. I do see that you need to go. So thanks for being with us. I think if the recording is around, I'm going to try and put all of these little segments together into one video. We'll see if it's recording at all. I think it is. There seems to be some kind of a network issue. We've had network issues over the last day that we've been battling with. Seems like a Vodacom cell phone tower somewhere that just got itself out of alignment. And ever since then, we've been battling with latent problems. So we'll stumble along until this thing collapses on us. That's a good point, Ken.
Yeah,
Ken,
I appreciate what you just said, because I've been grappling with all last weekend when I was fasting in the garden, and kind of how do you get then, you know, how do you symbolize it in a logical way to get from the heart through the third eye and up, because I can feel it, but I couldn't put it into words or into any symbolism. And that actually makes sense, because there's actually two systems in front of each other, the physical in the back and then the astral bodies in front. And one has to well, the whole work, this maybe it's the wrong word, but the spiritual work is to get out of the physical body and go along the astral bodies.
Can I just to come back to what I wanted to say about the heart? There's it's just another way of looking at things to maybe add to the model. I've been working a lot with addiction and survival patterns and trauma, and you know how all these things link up. And so for a start, I just want to say there's I think it ties in with what Ken said about the physical also and the astral, but just from a whole new viewpoint, our actions, our responses and reactions, you know, according to this topic, is mostly, it either comes from survival instinct or from spirit, from intuition, from guided, you know, wisdom thinking. So we're either in a reactive mode or we are consciously responding. So those two, you know, those are two, I don't really know what the right word is, but two places like disposition, you know, we either in a reactive state or we are responsive. And then with another dynamic coming in, I always think there's three intelligences. You know, we have a brain, we have a heart, and we have a stomach. So we have our thinking mind. So we have our mind, our heart, so our desires and our passion and our love and our truth, basically, and then our gut, which also gives us, you know, a sense of what I must do in a situation, you know. So and that's not necessarily mind, that's like a gut feel, and that also comes from either an intuitive knowing or an instinctual reaction. And, you know, I think when those three intelligences, which have physical organs connected to them, plus these two, what do I call them? Is disposition the right word? You know, I don't know if that's the right word, but the place where I'm operating for, when you combine those, then you get what, 2 times 3, and there's 6 different potentials in every situation that you find yourself in. And you know, all your experiences and all your memories, because your gut has a memory, your heart has a memory, and also your brain has a memory, and then also your traumas and all of these. So that makes everything more, you know, if you have 6 potentials to every reaction or response, you know, for every situation that's coming from, you know, or that's perceived, you're going to have 6 simply put potentials. Yes, 6 possibilities. So, and then we're back at the 6, which is 2 triangles, you know, joining, and everything connects again. So it's and again, like, what are you going to do with it? You know, it's always up to that point in the middle is always up to, what did you make of all of this? What did the creator in you, the God, finally create? And then we're back there. So yeah, I just wanted to add that because it's, I don't know, I like it.
It's great. Yeah. Yeah, thanks guys. It's always lovely chatting. We enjoy it very much, and I suppose with Zoom it makes it possible every single week, you know, for an hour or so, just to get together and refocus and share ideas and see where it goes. If you guys have an idea that you'd like to present, please, you know, you just take the floor one Sunday. So Ken, if you want to do that and sort of lead one of the Circle of Friends meetings, I'd be very happy for you to do that. It'd be very nice for you to do that.
That's awesome, but I need to just attend a few. We've come back into life from a long journey away from home. So, I mean, within myself.
Yes.
So yeah.
No,
I'd love to, but not right now. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Anytime. The offer is there. This is not my platform. It's our platform.
Tom, I think we will leave it in your capable hands, and we will just fill in on the fringes.
I'm no expert, my friend. I'm no expert. I just, I don't mind sort of hosting the space, anchoring the space. But it'd be nice. It's always lovely to get other ideas. I walk away from here now wanting to go back and tweak that drawing, because I think the idea of the what I take away from this is that the gut and the gut, I left the gut right out of this. It's those three middle chakra that are quite important, or the mind, the heart, and the gut. And I also love this idea of the imprint of the ethereal on top of the physical. Those are things we cannot miss out on. And somehow, without overcomplicating that drawing, I think what I've done is I've taken that drawing in terms of what do you call it, NLP, and sort of kept it more in that frame. But it's nice to bring some other spiritual dimensions onto it. Ken,
I just want to change my background.
I hate you. You remember that place, and I remember the lead up and the journey and the walk around there. It's on you.
That's why I wanted to change it.
Awesome.
I have something I want to ask you, Ken, and
Sorry,
May.
I got kicked off.
Okay,
No,
there is this kind of my wandering on, when you go from the head to the heart, because every time you have a spiritual experience, we as human, we want to automatically try and explain it. So it brings it back into the head. We need to leave it here. But how do we then go, here's the scientist in me, who's fascinated by the brain. How do I then explain even to myself, the opening of the third eye, the connection with the pineal gland, and the opening of the seventh chakra? How does that hold together? If I'm being told by Chief, and I agree, to keep it in the heart. That's why after my first Sundance, when the circle of friends asked me, "Can you explain?" And I was very reluctant to explain, because I needed to keep it here. Because the moment you bring it here, you kind of lose it. You try to bring it back into the logical mind, you kind of lose it. You need to keep it here. But then at the same time, as time goes by, I'm searching for answers, of course, as we all are. And one of the questions is, how does that connect with the brain, the pineal gland, and the etherical, the astral body, the third eye? Because we know that the third eye connects with the pineal gland, but how do we go through that, through the seventh chakra? Why is that represented like that? Because I can't explain it.
I can maybe add, oh, sorry.
That's fine, Mike, go ahead.
Sure. Okay. I can maybe just give you some. I don't know if I can answer your question, but I can maybe just give you something, another way to think of these things. And it's something that I tell most of my healing clients, because we're all stuck in our heads, and it blocks us from going, but we also need to explain these things to ourselves. So just where I'm coming from with another little model that I'm going to tell you now is from, I've been through personally, over probably the last 2 decades, I've been through pretty hectic, like psychological traumas, and trying to understand things that don't make sense. I did come to a point where I realized, I'm going to drive myself mad, and I'm going to break my brain even further if I keep trying to understand this. So I've had to do physical restoration in my actual organ, my thinking, my processing organ. And it actually, just to, or why I'm saying that is that understand that this is probably the most difficult thing for a mind to do, is to stop thinking, you know, and stop trying to understand something that doesn't make sense. So it took me to the point where my life was in danger to turn around from that and say, okay, I can't keep doing this. You know, so just understand that it is a difficult thing that you are dealing with. Don't be too hard on yourself, because it's just worsening it. And then what I actually got it from a children's story that I had in a book when I was very little, but there's, and it's going to take too long to tell the story, but it's a beautiful story. It's about this little being that's trying to figure out this exact thing. And he's not having, you know, he doesn't have peace in the world because he's thinking and he's thinking and he's thinking. And don't know if you understand Afrikaans, but there's a I'll put it in English now, but there's a dinkertjie en 'n wetertjie. And your dinkertjie dink and I think, your thinking mechanism thinks and thinks and thinks and thinks. And then there's knowing. And knowing just knows.
Correct.
And so this is what I tell my clients, is, you know, there's things that you can think and think and think and think and eventually understand, but not know why. And then there are things that you can know without understanding, but you know. And
True.
That to me is the difference between mind and spirit.
For
you
sure.
know, thinking mind and knowing from spirit. So if you can ask yourself, when you're sitting in your meditation or thinking, you know, and when that battle wants to go on, you know, what am I thinking, and what's your thoughts about it, and see that they are repeating themselves. And then, okay, but what do I know? Because in that, when you understand that, you know what, I know this, then hopefully at some point you're going to see that the knowing usually stays the same, but the thinking keeps going in circles. So, you know, we can keep doing this and
you know what, May, it's
burn ourselves out. Or
for me, it's not actually a battle. It's just a fascination, because I have the knowing, because I've experienced it, and I'm keeping it very much here. But there's an inquisitiveness that as in the human body, because I know this whole experience is at a very different level, and there are no words to explain it, because it's not of this. It's not of this human body experience. It is a spiritual experience. It's a feeling experience, and I don't have to explain that. I don't want to explain it, but I am at the same time studying the brain. Am I not? Okay, that is what I've been doing for the last 10 years. And as a human being still stuck in this human experience, I still want to find the parallels, like we've been doing today with the 3 pyramids, with the chakra systems. How does this go? And I like what Tom said. We go up and we come back down to the heart. But then how do we go through the third eye and out? How do we explain that? Because we're all here trying to find sort of some logical experience of the old ancient texts and where we are today. I'm in no need to explain what I'm feeling here, because I'm very much comfortable with. But there is an inquisitiveness here that still stays. So
I kind of think that
Ken has made
the right point there, and that is that what you're doing, Yvonne, is you seem to be looking at the body and the mechanisms of the body, and looking at the mechanisms of the flesh, how the chemistry works in the brain, and things, but you've forgotten about the ethereal overlay. And without that, you're missing a connection, you know.
Yeah. So remember, as we are going up, we are going into subtler and subtler and subtler energies. So we're going. So the analogy they use is in the gut, ice. The heart is water. The mind is gas, evaporation. So, having listened to what Mai also said and what you said, there's one thing that is a common thread here, and it's just equanimity.
Is what?
Equanimity. Equanimity. So all religions, all models of spirituality, and the end only comes down to one thing, is equanimity. So in the state of equanimity, through prayer, we invite the non-duality to enter. So that's an invitation. That in equanimity, we give the invitation to the divine, if we want to call it the divine, or the non-duality. That's actually what we're looking, because in equanimity is about non-duality. So maybe, Yvonne, if we are still thinking about the heart and the pineal gland, we are dual. It's not equanimity. There's not non-duality. So equanimity is the vehicle for us to get into a state of non-duality. Once we're in non-duality, we then, through prayer, which is the intention, we invite the non-duality into the being.
So I wondered, what did Chief say? Did he say that the longest journey was to travel from the head to the heart? Or did he say the longest journey was to bring the head to the heart?
No, he said the longest journey is from the head to the heart. And he said that when I arrived at first at Sundance, and I said, have you got some advice for me for this experience? And we just had a few sort of 5-10 minutes with each other, and that's what stood out. It was the first sentence, and it just marked me, and it stays with me ever since.
We're going to have to just watch time a little bit, because I see we've got about 3 minutes, and then it's going to kick us out again. But these are lovely thoughts to ponder, and nice stuff to pick up again in the debate. What's that, Yvonne?
Equanimity. I'm going to be thinking on that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. That's awesome.
Thank you, May. Thank you.
We're going to be kicked out in a second.
Yeah. Have a good
So
day.
lovely.
Okay.
I'll try and
Thank you
package
so much.
stuff this afternoon. Let's see.
Thank you.
Yes.
Awesome.
Greetings to everyone.
Namaste.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.